Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a minute. Please feel free to take a minute to get settled in, explore the webinar console. We do have an attendee chat and a Q&A box, as you see. So if you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, please feel free to send them in the chat or the Q&A, and we're going to get to them at the end when we have a Q&A session with Dr. Snipes, Natalie, and Anthony. All right, since we're at a minute after the hour, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Josephs, and I'm a demand generation specialist at OpenStax's. And for part or maybe whole of the webinar, I'm going to be filling in for my colleague, Dr. Natalie Allen, who is a community relations specialist at OpenStax's. She's at a conference right now and is having some connectivity issues, but our other two presenters are here. We have Dr. Marjorie Snipes, the senior contributing author of Introduction to Anthropology, as well as Anthony Palmiato, the director of higher education at OpenStax's. And today we are going to be discussing everything you need to know and the exciting features of OpenStax's free introductory anthropology textbook. So we have today's agenda up here on the screen. So we're going to do a brief introduction to OpenStax's. So what do we do? What do we offer? Then we're going to discuss why we decided to publish an anthropology textbook. We're going to have an exciting Q&A session with Dr. Snipes herself. Then we're going to discuss how you can access the textbook for free, how you can access the book's instructor and student resources for free, and do an audience Q&A session. So please feel free to send your questions in the chat throughout the course of the webinar. So many of you have likely heard of OpenStax's before, but if you're new to OpenStax's, there's a few key things you'll want to know. OpenStax's is a part of Rice University, which is located in the vibrant and beautiful city of Houston, Texas. We are a nonprofit, and we're able to sustain our work and our mission through philanthropic support. We receive grants from foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, individual donations from supporters, as well as mission support fees from our technology partners. As a nonprofit, OpenStax's is mission-oriented, and our aim is to transform learning so that education works for every single student. Our main area of work is publishing a library of free, peer-reviewed, openly licensed textbooks. Since we published our first textbook in 2012, we have saved students over $1.7 billion in textbook costs. We have a hearty community of over 36,000 faculty adopters, and we have served over 14 million students. A couple slides ago, you heard me say that OpenStax's offers free, peer-reviewed, openly licensed textbooks. But what does that mean? OpenStax's textbooks are an example of open educational resources, or OER. Up here on the screen, we have an excellent definition from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, which is a super strong supporter of OER. In essence, OER, or open educational resources, are any educational materials that are free to use, available publicly, and don't have traditional copyright restrictions on them that limit how users can edit and rearrange the content. So you can edit, revise, and redistribute the content to meet your individual course needs. OpenStax's textbooks are available for math, the sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, business, and college success. Each of our textbooks are aligned to individual course topics and outcomes, and are written by experienced and expert faculty like Dr. Snipes. Each of our textbooks undergoes a rigorous peer review and revision process, and we also make sure to publish our textbooks on multiple platforms and formats so that they're as accessible as possible. Our textbooks are available for free on our website in PDF format, and in WebView. And students and instructors can also order a print copy of our textbooks at a very low cost. Additionally, each of our textbooks also goes through regular editorial and currency updates. Our editorial team makes sure to edit our textbooks when it's pedagogically necessary. So if there's a major development in a field, we may publish a second edition of a textbook like we did earlier this year with astronomy. But our editorial team also makes sure to make regular updates to the web version of our books to make sure that the content is up to date, easy to understand, and representative of diverse audiences. Here at OpenStax's, we offer much more than just free textbooks. We also offer free instructor and student resources like test banks, lecture slides, and comprehensive instructor's manuals. We also offer free webinars like this one, as well as free articles on the OpenStax's blog about topics like tips for using OpenStax's, interviews with our authors, and tips for teaching and enhancing student engagement. Our support center is a really awesome resource to turn to if you have any questions. And if you're looking for educational technology to pair with your OpenStax's textbook, you can visit OpenStax's Tech Scout, our searchable, filterable tool that allows you to find courseware, engagement tools, and more that meet your course needs and align with each textbook. Now I'm going to pass it over to Anthony to talk about why we decided to publish an anthropology textbook.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining, and thank you so much, Lindsay. It's outstanding. This book was one had been thinking about doing for a very long time, and it's for a number of reasons. We cover social sciences and humanities and other disciplines that have many overlaps with anthropology, but not, of course, anthropology is anthropology. But since we're an OER publisher, faculty and organizations and students and entire colleges and college systems like to interplay and intercreate, remix, take pieces and change around the book pretty flexibly. That's what we offer in terms of the open publishing. And to have an anthropology book that enabled that, to go through detailed topics and to expose, have the opportunity to expose different students to the concepts within this course, both with, in the anthropology formal courses and also the opportunity to have that cross-pollination from across disciplines was really important to us. We've already actually seen some faculty thinking and talking and asking about how to do that. In general, like I said, it's a major course for us. It's an essential part of both gen ed and other curricula and other career paths and degree paths. So we wanted to make sure that we published in anthropology as well. And then also internally, we're very focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, increasing belonging, and part of that is understanding, the community that we're a part of, both in Houston and in Texas and in the country and in the world. And anthropology as a discipline does that as well as any other discipline, right? It's entirely essential for us to have that. And just for our own knowledge, that what we gain by developing a textbook there, even though it's authored by experts and reviewed by faculty, just the experience we've had, going through that. For example, on Indigenous Peoples Day, we were able to go through the chapter on Indigenous anthropology and discuss, what it means to us, what we didn't know before, what we needed to learn more about, for example. So it presents us an opportunity just internally. That's a bit of a small scale reason from on the larger, nationals front, but it's really important to us at OpenStax's.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and just introduce myself. I'm Dr. Marjorie Snipes, and I thank all of you for joining us, and thank you, Anthony and Lindsay, for setting this up and for going after an anthropology text. I think it's important for many reasons. I am a cultural anthropologist, and I've taught as a professor of anthropology at the University of West Georgia for 25 years. My research background is in the Andes. I've done research in Peru and also on the border between Argentina and Bolivia. And I focus on religion and pastoralism. and frequently find myself in the field of symbolic anthropology as well. The classes, however, that I teach at my university are bread and butter courses. So anthropological theory, methods. I do have a course on animals and culture, and of course, introduction to anthropology, which is a critical part of core and also our majors and minors education. I've written, just as a way to introduce my own self, I've written my own introductory text, and I have it published with Kendall Hunt, and I have just left that book and have joined up with the book that we just did in OpenStax's for many reasons that I'll share with you as we go further in.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Dr. Snipes. It's great to hear about your work and everything that you do for students. So our first question for you is, what does Introduction to Anthropology cover?
So this text is meant as a classical four-field introduction to anthropology text. So you'll find each of the subfields from cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, linguistics, and archaeology. You'll see them in the table of contents in various ways. Instead of designating, though, every subfield as its own chapter, we tended to try to work across chapters with major anthropological concepts like culture and culture change and evolution. So you're going to see those factors playing forth throughout the table of contents. And the most specific of the chapters are going to be chapter 4 and 5 on biological anthropology. But we wanted to create a text that would allow people from every subfield who are teaching forefield or perhaps introduction to these subfields that they would find useful items across the entire text.
Thank you so much. And our next question for you is, what are the features that make Introduction to Anthropology so unique?
Yes, so as a group of co-authors, we had several strategy sessions. And the tension that I'm sure you're familiar with, you face when you're preparing your class or when you're writing a text, is you want to have some sense of traditional grounding so that instructors coming from many different backgrounds into their own classrooms, different subfields, perhaps different universities focusing on different aspects of anthropology, we wanted to have a traditional grounding so that they would recognize this text. And yet we also wanted to offer some new features. So you'll find that, again, going through the text, some things appear that they're classic cases that are covered in anthropology, and then some new things as well. So I want to highlight a few features that we specifically developed for this text. The driving, so one of the features I have to mention first was the driving force for us all being involved in this was that this is a free and open access text. And I think that is a feature of the text itself. I frequently in my classes, I've used different intro texts. I used Kotak and Haviland and Ember. So over the years, there have been many of them. And one of the challenges I find is that once students have invested money in a text, as a professor, I feel I need to use as much of that text as possible so they feel they've made a good investment. By using the OpenStax's Introduction to Anthropology, I don't have that restraint in my teaching. And so my students can read certain sections of certain chapters, and I can tailor the text to my class needs and the topics that I want to lecture on. So I think that is one of the features. I'm going to try to share my screen now, let's see, and show you a few other things. So you should be looking at Jason DeLeon. One of the specific features that we developed for this text was the profiles in anthropology. And in this section, we hone in on the work of one particular anthropologist. We do have people who are traditional, such as Franz Boas, which you would expect in an anthropology text, but also more recent and current people. Jason DeLeon works on the border between the US and Mexico and studies migrants, and he studies it from a four-field perspective. So he's a really interesting scholar because he's doing something quite unique in that. We have people like him. We have Gillian Tett in here, who is studying global financial markets from an anthropological perspective, and Beatriz Medicine, who is a Lakota indigenous anthropologist who recently died, and her work focused on culture and language. So we tried to make these profiles diverse, both from being historical and contemporary, more traditional anthropologists that frequently get listed, and those that are too often overlooked. So we've attempted to make this a very diverse group of profiles. And again, professors can use the profiles that are best in their classes for the topics that they're emphasizing. The other feature that we use in this text is called mini fieldwork activities, or what you could refer to as small projects. So each chapter has at least one, in fact, it's normally one per chapter, mini fieldwork activity that encourages students to go out in their community or to do a self-reflection that would be practicing anthropology much the way an anthropologist would. We designed these so that they could be accomplished in a traditional class structure, recognizing that most of us are teaching introductory classes as a core course. And so our students are doing many other things. The vast majority of them have never heard of anthropology. And so we wanted to provide activities that would help them know the discipline, but also get to know their diverse community that is all around them, including at the university setting. So we're trying to create an anthropologist in the field type experience. The page you're looking at now is about getting to know people who have migrated in some way in their life, from immigrants who may be in their local community to even other students, international students, or even friends who have had to move across town or into another setting. So it's about applying anthropology in the real world and understanding just how vast what we do is. Here's another one. It's a courtroom observation where students are encouraged to go in and observe the political ritual itself and the different statuses and roles that people have in this ritual. So again, it's getting students out into the community and understanding the relevance of anthropology in our world. Another feature that is in some chapters, so these are occasional, they're not in every chapter, is called ethnographic sketches. And in these, each of us as co-authors were writing original ethnographic sketches on our own field research. So these allow students really to hear us speaking in our own words about what it's like to work in different settings. This one is from the Kalapuya of the Willamette Valley in the northwestern U.S., and David Lewis did these sketches. And so you'll find them occasionally within certain chapters. And then I did my sketches on the Argentine Andes. This is one on the Day of the Dead as it's experienced in the Andes. And so students actually just get an up close and personal view. They're almost like field note vignettes, like little stories that were part of our experiences in the field. And I think it gives them a feel for what anthropologists actually do. And then the last feature that I want to really point out, because it was something I was real excited about, and I think I'll just stop sharing my screen here. Let's see. Here we are. So the other feature I really want to highlight for those of you who are interested in this text, and that is the creation of specialty chapters. We were extremely intentional about this. And in fact, there was a lot of discussion about which chapters would be most representative of anthropology today. And while I'm sure there are differing opinions, I don't at all think that everyone would be in agreement with us. We wanted to present chapters that represented our fields and the exciting things that anthropologists do. So too often I experience in my own intro classes that students learn the 4 subfields and then it kind of ends. And they don't really see that we're actually clustered also in specialties, contributing to work that's going on right now. So for example, we have chapters on medical anthropology, the anthropology of food, indigenous peoples, Animals and Culture, and Anthropology of Media. And while I'm sure people will use these in different ways, I will share with you that in my own classes, I've done a couple of things with these chapters. Instead of including them in the regular semester work, I assign them as a group, and students are encouraged to choose one of those chapters that most interests them and to do either a small project that we'll kind of design together on that chapter, or to read and do follow-up research. But I have those chapters used sporadically during the semester, and I usually leave them open for choice to my students. Or when I'm teaching a certain topic, I'll go into one of those chapters and grab something from it that's relevant to the topic. So I think that's really exciting. I don't know any other intro texts who actually present these more advanced specialty topics. And I think it's really important for students to see this. I will mention that this summer I was teaching my 4-field intro online. And at that time, the Humane Society in Virginia had won a court order to shut down the breeding facility in Vigo in Cumberland, Virginia. And some 4,000 beagle dogs were released and looking for adoption and rehoming. This was all over the news. My students were very aware of it, very interested in it, and I was able immediately to pull into the Animals and Culture chapter and show students what anthropologists are doing on behalf of animals. The profile in that chapter is on Dr. Barbara King, a physical anthropologist, and so they were immediately able to go and see some of her work and what she's doing now on behalf of animals. So these chapters are very valuable. Those are the major features that I've been excited about, and I think they're the highlights of the book.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Snipes. Those are incredible features, and it was really wonderful to be able to hear how you're using those parts of the textbook in your classroom, and how, since OpenStax's textbooks are free and openly licensed, you're more empowered to customize the book to meet your course needs and really pull out the components that are most central for your course or most interesting for your students, or would truly maximize their learning and their experience in your specific course. Our next question for you: who should use Introduction to Anthropology in their classroom?
So I think the book is uniquely positioned to be good for a 4-field intro course, or an Introduction to Cultural Anthropology can also use this text. I think it's also extremely useful as a recommended text for some of the upper level anthropology courses. So because it's a free resource, there are sections of the book that would be relevant in many of the courses that we would teach as anthropologists. So yeah, I think it has a wide range of use as a required text in some cases, and a recommended text in others.
Thank you. That's really critical information for our instructors and for our attendees to know. Another question that we have for you is that, as we previously discussed, OpenStax's textbooks are all 100% free, peer-reviewed, and openly licensed. They're an example of open educational resources, or OER. So from your perspective as a professor and an anthropologist, why an OER anthropology textbook? Why is it important for there to be an openly licensed, freely available anthropology textbook on the market?
Yeah, I actually jotted down 3 things I wanted to say here, because I think this is a really important question that most of us think about quite a bit, and especially now. I think it's a deep social question as well. Having free resources in a world that is quite desperate for creative, critical, and compassionate thinkers, I think is pretty much a no-brainer. We need resources available that represent ways of thinking creatively about the problems that we're facing, and that can educate our students easily. I think easing the cost of education is a moral issue right now, as there's such a burden among our students with paying tuition and also adding textbook costs on top of that. And then the third reason I wrote down, because this was something that affected me when I made the choice to write for OpenStax's, is that because the text is open for being critiqued, amended, and updated, it's a text that is self-correcting in some sense by the community which is using it. And I think that's very important. While it starts out as a vision with a small group of people, it is open to being adapted, shaped, and molded by all of those who are using it. And I think that's that represents the best of us, or it should, it can. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was a really lovely answer. I think that making education more accessible and affordable for all students is very central to our work here at OpenStax. So I think that ties in directly to why there's such a critical need for our students to have access to free resources, especially in a time where the cost of traditional textbooks is so high, in addition to the cost of tuition and fees and other components of receiving a college education.
Right.
Our last question for you for the author Q&A portion of this webinar, before, of course, we answer any audience questions and field those to you, is you're one of Introduction to Anthropology's senior contributing authors. What was your writing process like? What were some concepts or themes or ideas or values that you really focused and honed in on when you were writing this text?
Yes, I mean, I would want the audience to be aware that the three of us as the senior authors met quite a bit over Zoom and discussed issues and sent emails back and forth. And so I do think that the text represents a collective vision. I think we shared a lot of these goals in writing. My approach on every topic that I wrote personally was that it be instructive and that it reflects the truth of what anthropologists do, some of the complexity that is in our decision-making and our work, and also be a critical examination of the concept. I think it's important for us to see maybe the inherent weaknesses or challenges that are in the research that we do, but also the good things that come from that. I also wanted to make sure, and I think this is true of all of the co-authors, that we left things out there that are still left to do, that we brought that up so that our students could see that, encouraging students to take an anthropological perspective in their careers. I think we're all, and I think everyone on the call is aware that the majority of students that we teach are not going to become anthropologists. And our job really in teaching them is not to make them into anthropologists, but to make them into critical and creative thinkers. I've always appreciated Margaret Mead's words about being compassionate citizens. And I would simply add the word global to that we are speaking to a large audience now. And what we most want from our students is that they can appreciate the things that we've appreciated and learned and have found useful. So I think that working towards creating thoughtful, problem-solving individuals was a major goal. And I think it really did shape my writing process in many ways. So I wanted to bring up contemporary issues as well as, again, these traditional and historical events in anthropology.
Thank you so much again for sharing, Dr. Snipes. I really like your idea of building compassionate global citizens. That's definitely something that is going to really stick with me from what you said during this webinar. Now we are going to talk a bit about how you can access the textbook, and then we're going to field any audience questions to Dr. Snipes and Anthony. So OpenStax's textbooks are available for free online. And the way that you would access, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the way that you would access Introduction to Anthropology by OpenStax is that you would first begin by going to openstax.org. Then you're going to go over to the subjects drop-down menu over here, and you can either click on all or the social sciences. Our books are listed here in alphabetical order. You can see that Introduction to Anthropology is right here. So when you click on the book details page, you're brought to a page that lists out a summary of the text, our senior contributing authors, information about our rigorous editorial process, and just some basic information about when our book was published, when the web version was last published, and the ISBN numbers. Over here on the left-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a Get the Book menu. As I mentioned previously in our webinar, OpenStax's textbooks are available in a variety of different formats. They're available for free online. Students and instructors can also download OpenStax's textbooks as a PDF version. This is very beneficial for students who have internet connectivity issues because once they download the PDF, they can access it offline at any time after that. And we also provide an opportunity for instructors or students to order a print copy at a low cost. We know that for accessibility reasons or just for an instructor or student's preference, they may prefer having a print version of the textbook. So we also offer that as an option through our website. When you click on the View Online button right here, you're able to view our text right here online. You can search through the book, you can adjust the font size, you can click hyperlinks to other sections of the textbook. And another very unique part about OpenStax's textbooks is that because they're available online in this web view format, students can actually, if they create a student account, make highlights and take notes within the text itself. So for example, let's say that I want to highlight something about ethnology. Let's say this is an important definition. I'll say I'm a student in the anthropology course, and this is an important definition for me to remember. I can go ahead and highlight this, do it in purple, and I can also add a note. And we believe that this really enhances the textbook experience for students because they're able to highlight certain components that are critical for learning in their course. They're able to take notes on things that interest them or stood out to them or that they would look into further. And they're able to access all of their notes and their highlights right over here, which is very critical for them to gather their notes and make sure that they're all in one place. Now that we have looked at how you can access the textbook online, we are going to dive into our instructor resources. So as we discussed earlier in the webinar, all OpenStax's textbooks come with a unique suite of free instructor and student resources. And you can access the instructor resources in this tab. And you may be wondering, hey, OpenStax offers a test bank. How do we make sure that students can access the test bank? And that's a really excellent question. So the only way to access these instructor resources is if you create an instructor account. So I'll log out of my instructor account. And as you can see, if you're not logged into your instructor account, or if you don't have an instructor account, you can't access these instructor resources. Creating an instructor account is very easy, and we'll send the link in the chat to do that. And when you submit a request to create an instructor account, this gets fielded to our customer support team who verifies that you are in fact an instructor and thereby maintains the integrity of our materials and to make sure that they're used for stringent learning and educational purposes. Introduction to Anthropology comes with its own unique suite of instructor resources. As you can see here, there is a Canvas course cartridge, and then we also have access to additional resources below. The OER Commons Hub is an excellent resource to turn to. The OER Commons Hub is a unique place where instructors can share resources that they've created for this textbook with other instructors, and where instructors can thereby find resources created by other instructors for this textbook. And it's a really excellent way for instructors to also connect with other instructors across the country who are using this textbook and learn more about their teaching experiences and the supplemental resources that they may have created to use alongside this book. We offer our Instructor Getting Started guide, which walks a bit through how to use our textbook and everything that instructors need to know. We have our test bank over here. Introduction to Anthropology comes with a test bank that contains a variety of multiple choice, short answer, and essay questions. I believe that the text has over 1,100 questions in the test bank, which is absolutely incredible. And as we note here, since many instructors use these test bank questions for graded assignments, they are available only through an instructor account. Our free anthropology textbook also comes with free lecture slides that can be used alongside the text, and they include key images, graphics, definitions, and examples from the book. Additionally, we offer a comprehensive instructor's manual. And this instructor manual provides some tips and guidance for maximizing everything that Introduction to Anthropology and OpenStax's has to offer in your course, and some strategies for using the book's unique features and delivering the content in a dynamic and interesting fashion for students. Our last two resources are Diversity and Representation Development Guidelines. It's very central to OpenStax's work that we are creating textbooks that are representative of diverse audiences and the diverse audience of students that we are ultimately putting our textbook in the hands of. So these guidelines can be used to develop and improve open educational resources and to provide some guidance on creating open educational resources that really center diversity, equity, and inclusion. Lastly, we offer docx files for easy customization. Our textbook can be used as is. However, as Dr. Snipes noted, a lot of instructors like to customize their textbook and really focus on chapters that are central to their course or their syllabus or to whatever they're hoping to teach to their students. So these docx files can be downloaded, and you're able to make adjustments, add your own content, make edits. And since our textbooks are openly licensed, you're able to make these changes freely and openly and ultimately share them with your students to improve their educational experience. Lastly, from the Introduction to Anthropology page, you can find our student resources. And these resources are available for all students. You don't need to create an instructor account. You don't need to create a student account or an account at all in order to download these resources. And our Student Getting Started guide just provides some tips for using OpenStax's textbooks. And our Student Time Management guide provides some tips that students can implement in their own lives to enhance their time management skills. Awesome. So now we are going to talk a bit more about creating your free instructor account. So creating your free instructor account is easy. I will put the link in the chat for all of you to access. But once you fill out the form, as I mentioned before, it gets sent to our customer support team who verifies that you are in fact an instructor. It typically takes between 2 to 3 business days. And then after that time frame, you should be able to have access to your instructor account, including all of the excellent instructor resources that we have to offer to go alongside Introduction to Anthropology. And I'll also put this email address in the chat, but if you have any questions or encounter any issues when completing or when filling out the form to request an instructor account, you can send an email to our customer support team at info@openstax.org. Now we are going to dive into our Q&A session. So if any audience members have any questions that they would like to ask Anthony or Dr. Snipes, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And I think one question that we can start off with is for Dr. Snipes. So what have your students enjoyed the most about using this textbook in your course?
So I think that the thing I hear from them in class is they enjoy actually exploring in the textbook. It's so easy to go from link to link and see different comments, different profiles and specialties within the text. I think they've enjoyed just understanding the scope of anthropology. And the text is it's very inviting to do that. I've also assigned links from different chapters in a topic that I'm studying, so it encourages them to see what else is in that chapter. I've also heard that it's very colorful. I agree with them that they like the pictures that are used to illustrate what we're studying.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm not currently seeing any additional questions that were submitted. If our audience members have any questions, please feel free to submit them through the chat or the Q&A. But I actually wanted to, Anthony, is there any additional information about Introduction to Anthropology that you think our audience members should know today?
I would just, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would just say that, one thing that happens in a great way after these books publish and sort of live in the community for a while, we often begin to see some of that customization, some of that work around them, and so on. And with the textbooks, as Lindsay described, we have ancillaries. Many faculty would use a set of lecture slides or a test bank in part, right? You would change them, bring them into your own, incorporate your own concepts, feedbacks, questions, if you use, classroom response or anything like that. And then also in other arenas, such as within LMSs, discussion forums and other classroom tools that you might use. What ends up happening after a while is that some of these get shared back out with the community. And often faculty will post these on sites like OER Commons and the hubs in various locations, both on a national front, but also many states and even colleges, individual colleges or college systems have sites like that. And what we try to do is amplify that and curate that and sort of extend that. As we learn about them, we try to share them back out, or at least make them known in some way, often by linking to one of the hubs off our site. But I would say that it's important, I think, to kind of keep checking back. Every you might look and there might not be anything, of course, a few months after a book publishes, but after a year, after faculty have gone through a semester of teaching with it, or two, they might have material they're comfortable sharing out, and that happens a lot. And we also, this isn't, the webinar isn't to ask anybody to do work, but if you also do that, it's great to share it out. Our materials, by being open, they are completely open. It's a CC BY license, meaning that you can use it and repost any of the materials. You can take the art or the text and reuse it in any way you want. It's not CC BY, non-commercial, or share alike, or no derivatives. Those are other types of Creative Commons license. That's not what we're doing with this textbook. It's CC BY, meaning all you have to do is use it and say where you got it from, essentially, and that's what's good practice. And of course, around teaching students, modeling that good approach. So anyway, that's a long answer and a long point, but keep checking back. And then if you do create anything on your own or see any opportunities, please go ahead. And I, if I could say one more thing, Lindsay mentioned earlier the errata and the updating process. It actually goes a little bit like that too. As we get feedback, the errata that we receive, and we receive a good amount, and we are very transparent about it. Everything we ever receive stays on our website. Everybody can see it. This used to be sort of a every publisher should do that, and we do. It's part of it. It's in the name that we're open. It isn't a wiki book or anything like that. Everything that comes in gets vetted and validated by faculty who are teaching this course, and it's really checked for two things. One is the error or the reported issue or the update. Sometimes it's a currency thing. Is it valid? Is it correct? And also, is it appropriate for the course? Does it fit into an intro course? Often we receive items that might be asking for expansions in certain area that might be just too much for an intro course, for example, and it just has to see where it fits. On the other hand, as Dr. Snipes said, it is a free book. If we add a page, it doesn't increase the price. So we'll go ahead and add those things when it's appropriate and when we can, and of course if there are actual errors or things that are not current and so on. So that's another area. The book doesn't. We don't see massive change year to year, but if you keep checking back and keep seeing how those updates are coming through, as well as looking for ancillaries and other contributions from the community, it ends up being a pretty enriching and sort of communal, building upon itself experience.
No, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Anthony. I think that I really appreciate how you brought up the errata and how we make all of these suggestions that we get accessible for our audience to see. So actually, if you would like to see, if you go to the anthropology page, the book details page, when you scroll down, you see the errata right here, a little bit about our rigorous review process. There are two links here. You can click on this link to submit a suggestion of your own that you have for our textbook. And then you can also see, as Anthony mentioned, the entire list of errata that we have received, the description of it, and our decision. So for example, we received one back in April, and we're actually going to make a correction to our textbook in order to reflect that. It's really critical that our users are sharing this with us so we can improve our textbooks. And at the end of the day, we do create these books for instructors and students, and we really value instructors' feedback, and we want to implement that. So we have a question actually in the chat here, and I think, Anthony, this may be a good question for you. So do you know if there will be additional anthropology materials created? For example, a lab manual for biological anthropology?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah. So that is something that we don't currently have on the docket, as you might say. However, lab manuals in particular are one of the #1 items that are created by the community and that we look to support the creation of. And it's not to say we will never do a lab manual for biological anthropology or another type of ancillary for specifically for this course. Or other anthropology books, but we rely on very generous philanthropic funding to do what we do, and sometimes that just that we have to prioritize, and there's finite resources and so on of what we can do. However, what we've done in other disciplines, biology, chemistry, psychology, and so on, where there are other types of assets that are pretty robust, like a lab manual. We've supported that creation as much as possible by providing all the images, and we can get people the source files. The source files aren't available just out of the book, but if anybody wants them and they ask us for them, we can give them to them. If they need, unlabeled images or something, we use that, of course, that might come through in biological anthropology. It comes across in A&P all the time, and so on. So we can help with that a little bit, but what often happens is in many of our other disciplines, again, after a little time, we see those items created, maybe the community comes together, and then also what many states and other organizations do. I know Texas does it often. They're not the only one. Wisconsin does it often, and so does, obviously Georgia does a ton. Is offer grants for the creation. There's implementation grants sometimes for OER, but there's also creation or curation grants that faculty and faculty teams or consortia of schools get together and create. And we just were engaged in a 2-year process in Texas where something about 30 schools, 40 schools create all types of ancillaries around, not necessarily just OpenStax's books. Many of them used OpenStax's books, but they're all types of OER, and those included things like lab manuals and so on. So I think maybe stay tuned. We don't have it right now if you'd ever want to yourself engage on that process, please, let's talk.
Oh, thank you so much, Anthony. We really appreciate you answering our audience members' question. I don't see any other questions from our audience members in the chat or the Q&A. So I think one final question we can ask both Dr. Snipes and Anthony is there any other information today that we didn't cover that our audience members should know, or anything else specifically that you would like to share about introduction to anthropology or OpenStax in general?
The only thing I would add was a question that I had to you earlier, which is since knowing how many people are actually using this text is important in gaining funding for more projects, you might explain to people how to make note that they're actually adopting this text officially so that they'll be counted.
No, thank you. That's an excellent point. So I sent a link in the chat to our adoption form, and I'll share my screen and walk through that form right now. So as Dr. Snipes mentioned, it's really critical for us to know who's using our textbooks so that we can know more accurately and fully who's using our textbook, who is our audience, and how can we better meet their needs. And as Dr. Snipes mentioned, having an accurate number is really critical for us to obtain grant funding and ultimately expand our library of over 50 free, peer-reviewed, openly licensed textbooks. So I sent the adoption form link in the chat, and you can see it right here on my screen. But essentially, this form takes only a minute or two to fill out. And essentially, you'll just fill in basic demographic information. And then on the next page, you'll just let us know which book or books you're using in your classroom, submit the form, and then we will have your numbers on hand. Anthony, is there any additional information that you think our attendees here today should know about introduction to anthropology, OpenStax, adopting OpenStax, or using OpenStax in their classroom, anything of that sort?
Thank you. I would just say one other thing, I'll start off with like wider OpenStax. We're here to talk about anthropology. As we've mentioned, we have a lot of other books, and we expect that many other disciplines will utilize portions of this book in their work. As an anthropology instructor, you can do the same in other arenas. Some of the other areas that Lindsay demonstrated the excerpts from our college success book that appear on the student site for this book, but we have an entire college success book. We have an entire writing guide with a handbook. The handbook includes all the stuff about, citations and academic integrity and proper grammar and formatting a paper and how to do a research paper and so on. So if any of those tools, and then we have, we do have biology and chemistry and microbiology and other sciences, psychology and sociology as well. All those resources, mentioning, for example, the writing guide, if those are for any use in your class, even just a link on your syllabus, or something, hey, here's another resource you can get to. You are free to use those as well. They might be interesting for your students. They might be helpful as they're working in your course. They might be enrichment topics. And all of those books, similar to anthropology, they have features and assessments and activities that go along with them too. Maybe some of them cross-pollinate on your direction. And I'll say again about anthropology itself, we're just so excited to have this book. The engagement that we've seen on it, there are, over 100 faculty, probably I haven't looked actually since the start of the semester, using the book already. It just published in the spring, and those of you who have been around publishing, college instruction know it takes a little time for books to get going. We're really proud about that. It's an incredible start. And so that means that there are a lot of our faculty who have seen this book. It aligns with their course. They felt that it was the right quality for them. They liked the features and things like that. So we're sort of that's really, you should really listen to Dr. Snipes and to those faculty, probably even a little bit more than Lindsay and myself, about that sort of thing. And we'll be engaging with them. Lindsay mentioned, for example, the opportunity to provide the adoption information. That is optional. We'd love you to do it. But we also, we will ask, we might send you some information. We might send you information about new blog posts, future webinars, other events. We won't spam. You can opt out anytime. But if you do want to keep up to date about OpenStax or just OER in general, or especially this book and anything associated with it, yeah, please go ahead and sign up or create an account, because we'll be able to keep you up to date on any new resources we provide as well.
Thank you so much for that information, Anthony. And we want to thank our audience members for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to speak with me, Dr. Snipes, and Anthony, and just to learn more about everything that OpenStax and Introduction to Anthropology has to offer. We are always making improvements to our textbooks and adding additional resources. So as Anthony mentioned, if you'd like to receive emails, we do promise we won't spam you. I know I send out these emails. If you would like to receive email updates about any additional resources we create or additional features that OpenStax has to offer, please fill out the form. Anthony mentioned it's optional, that is in the chat, and we'll be sure to send you those updates. If you would like to view our entire library of resources, access our blog, access TechScout, contact customer support, you can do so by visiting openstax.org. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can send those questions to either Natalie at openstax.org. Even though Natalie couldn't be here today, she is here for our users, and she is an excellent, excellent resource to turn to. She knows so much about Introduction to Anthropology and everything OpenStax has to offer, and would love to connect with you. And you can also contact our customer support team directly at support@openstax.org. Thank you so much, Dr. Snipes, for your work on this textbook, everything you do for students, and for your work preparing for and presenting at our webinar today. It was lovely hearing everything you had to say about Introduction to Anthropology and your work on the book. And thank you, Anthony, for sharing all this critical information with us about OpenStax and Introduction to Anthropology and its resources. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay. This was great. Thanks especially for picking it up last minute in terms of a lot of the webinar, and it was really well done. So thank you. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We hope that everyone has an excellent day, and feel free to contact us with any additional questions. All right. See ya.
Bye-bye.